Picture this. You're at Narita Airport in Tokyo. You look out the window and you see the biggest passenger plane in the world rolling toward the gate. But something is off. The plane is painted like a sea turtle. Not a logo, not a small graphic. The entire aircraft, a massive cartoon sea turtle stretched across the fuselage of an Airbus A380. Blue on one plane, green on another, orange on the third. Three of the most expensive commercial aircraft ever built. Decorated like something you'd see at a children's aquarium. This is a real thing that happened. And the story behind why Japan's biggest airline ended up with three giant turtle planes they never wanted, never planned for, and never actually needed, is one of the strangest corporate decisions in modern aviation history. Here's how it happened. In 2011, a small Japanese low-cost carrier called Skymark Airlines decided to dream very big. Skymark was a budget airline, short-haul domestic routes, cheap tickets, nothing glamorous. But their CEO had an idea. What if Skymark went international? Not with 737s or A320s like every other budget carrier. With the Airbus A380, the world's biggest plane. 6 of them. Skymark placed an order for 6 A380s. The aviation world raised an eyebrow. A budget carrier with no long-haul experience ordering 6 super jumbos was already unusual. But Airbus took the order and work began. Then reality hit. Running 6 A380s on international routes requires infrastructure, crews, maintenance contracts, route rights, and capital that Skymark simply didn't have. By 2014, the payments started falling behind. Airbus had no choice but to cancel the order. 6 A380s were now sitting in the production pipeline. With no buyer, Airbus was furious, and Skymark was in serious trouble. By January 2015, Skymark filed for bankruptcy protection. A Japanese budget airline that had tried to leap from domestic short-haul to A380 Super Jumbo international operations, in one move, had collapsed completely under the weight of its own ambition. Now here's where the story stops being about Skymark and starts being about a much bigger fight. When Skymark went bankrupt, the restructuring process opened up something far more valuable than the airline itself. Skymark held slots at Tokyo Haneda Airport, and Haneda slots are among the most coveted pieces of real estate in global aviation. Haneda is Tokyo's main city airport, closer to the business district than Narita, more convenient for premium passengers, and strictly limited in capacity. Getting slots there is nearly impossible. Losing them is catastrophic. 2 groups immediately moved to take control of Skymark's restructuring. One was backed by ANA, Japan's biggest and most prestigious full-service carrier. The other was backed by Delta Airlines, one of the largest airlines in the world, and a carrier with very clear ambitions in the Japanese market. Think about what was really at stake here. If Delta won the Skymark restructuring, they would gain a platform inside the Japanese domestic market, access to Haneda slots, and a foothold that would directly threaten ANA on its home turf. For ANA, this wasn't just a business opportunity, it was a defensive war. Losing to Delta wasn't an option. ANA won the deal, but winning came at a price that nobody talks about. Airbus was one of Skymark's biggest creditors. They were owed significant money from the cancelled A380 order. For Airbus to support ANA's restructuring bid and back off their creditor claims, ANA needed to give them something. And what Airbus wanted was simple. Take 3 of the 6 cancelled A380s. ANA said yes. Let that sink in for a moment. ANA didn't want A380s. They had never planned for A380s. Their entire network was built around efficient long-haul aircraft like the 787 Dreamliner. The A380 didn't fit their routes, their strategy, or their business model. But the price of winning the Skymark deal and keeping Delta out of Haneda was agreeing to buy 3 of the most expensive commercial planes ever built. 3 aircraft they had no plan for. 3 aircraft that didn't fit anywhere in their network. 3 aircraft that cost roughly $400 million each at list price. ANA had just won a corporate war, and the bill was 3 unwanted super jumbos. So what do you do when you're Japan's biggest airline and you've just inherited 3 A380s you never asked for? You get creative, very creative. ANA's solution was to take the one route in their network where an A380 actually made sense and pour everything into making it special. Tokyo Narita to Honolulu, Hawaii. Japan has one of the strongest tourism relationships with Hawaii in the world. Japanese travelers love Hawaii. The route generates consistent demand, and crucially, it's a route where filling a large plane is actually achievable because leisure travelers tend to book in volume. ANA took all 3 A380s and dedicated them entirely to Hawaii. But they didn't stop there. They commissioned 3 completely unique paint schemes. Each plane would be painted as a honu, the Hawaiian sea turtle, which is also a sacred symbol in Hawaiian culture. The first plane, in green, the third, in orange. They called the project the Flying Honu. The response was extraordinary. Passengers didn't just book the route. They specifically chose which turtle they wanted to fly on. Travel communities formed around spotting all 3 liveries. The planes became a destination within a destination. You weren't just flying to Hawaii, you were flying on the blue turtle, or the green one, waiting for the orange one to return to service. What had started as an unwanted obligation had become one of the most recognizable and beloved aircraft liveries in the world. But here's what you need to understand. The Flying Honu concept, as brilliant as it was a solution to a problem ANA never should have had. These planes were still fundamentally mismatched with ANA's network. Outside of Hawaii, they had nowhere to go. You can't redeploy an A380 onto a thin route just because you need to park it somewhere. The economics don't work. So all 3 planes were essentially locked into one route, one destination, generating revenue on a corridor that didn't require super jumbo capacity in the first place. Now ask yourself, what could have happened if things had gone differently? What if Delta had won the Skymark restructuring? Delta would have gained domestic Japanese slots, a local airline platform, and direct access to routes that feed into ANA's most important markets. ANA's competitive position in Japan could have been seriously damaged for years. Measured against that outcome, 3 unwanted A380s start to look like a bargain. What if ANA had refused to take the planes and lost Airbus's support? The Skymark deal might have collapsed entirely. Delta's bid could have succeeded, or worse. A prolonged legal fight over the restructuring could have left Haneda slots in limbo, benefiting nobody and creating uncertainty across the entire Japanese aviation market. What if ANA had taken the planes and had no strategy for them? Parking 3 A380s without a route earns you nothing but depreciation and storage costs. The Flying Honu concept wasn't just creative marketing. It was financially necessary. Without a dedicated route and a reason for passengers to specifically want those planes, ANA would have been paying to store aircraft. That generated zero revenue. When you look at those alternatives, the decision starts to make a different kind of sense. ANA didn't blunder into this. They made a calculated trade, strategic control of Haneda. In exchange for a fleet problem, they would then have to solve creatively. Then, in early 2020, COVID hit. International air travel collapsed almost overnight. The Flying Honu fleet was grounded. All 3 planes sat idle. The Hawaii route, that had been their entire purpose, disappeared completely. For 2 years, ANA's 3 A380s did nothing. They sat parked, costing money, generating nothing. A very expensive reminder of a deal made 5 years earlier, under very different circumstances. But the planes came back. Regular commercial service on the Narita to Honolulu route fully resumed in 2022. The Turtles returned. Passengers who had waited 2 years to fly on them booked immediately. The brand loyalty that ANA had built around the Flying Honu concept proved remarkably durable. People hadn't forgotten, they'd been waiting. So here is the full picture of what actually happened. A budget airline dreamed too big and collapsed. A corporate battle between Japan's national carrier and one of America's largest airlines played out through a bankruptcy process, and ANA won that battle by accepting 3 planes they never wanted, finding the one place in their network where those planes could work, painting them like sea turtles, and turning a forced acquisition into one of the most talked about aircraft liveries in aviation history. The A380 was never the right plane for Aina, but the deal that came with it protected something far more valuable than any single aircraft ever could. And sometimes, in aviation, like in business, the price of winning looks nothing like what you expected to pay. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, subscribe so you do not miss the next one. And drop a comment below. Do you think Aina made the right call taking those 3 A380s? Or did they overpay for the Haneda slots? We read every comment,